Did you know there's actually 7 actively produced tiny house shows right now on TV between 3 different channels. So we're really, really excited to be able to welcome to the stage next my friend Jewel. So more specifically, I've had the opportunity, she and I have met several times. I've had the opportunity to also interview her on the Tiny House podcast. And she was most famously featured on the show Tiny House Big Living. Our next speaker, Jewel Pearson, is more well known as Miss Gypsy Soul. After downsizing her lifestyle over the course of 10 years, she built an amazing 360 square foot tiny house that is currently located right here in North Carolina in Charlotte. And now she's very happy to call it home. Today she is sponsored by one of our featured builders, Pearson, a tiny home and cottage company, and Jewel is a dynamic speaker, a fantastic person, and a wonderful advocate for the tiny house community. Please join me in welcoming Jewel Pearson.
Okay, so she said I was a dynamic speaker, and I will say that I'm always a work in progress. I had the bright idea to get some braces just recently. Can y'all hear me? Sorry. Is that better? So I had the bright idea just recently to get some braces. I probably should have scheduled that after speaking because it makes for some interesting word pronunciation. So just roll with me. If something sounds a little weird, just give a sister a break. Good morning. Happy to be here. Thank you all very much for being here, for joining us at this Tiny House Street Festival. If you follow me, know anything about my story, you'll know that I talk a lot about following your dreams and designing a life that you love. My building of my tiny house was absolutely me following my dream. It was a dream that started when my daughter was very young. I knew as a single parent, parenting is hard. I'm sure most of you all, the parents, know that that's a tough job. As a young single parent, it's even harder sometimes. And I knew that once I was done with that, once I was on the other side of my daughter being an adult or headed off into adulthood, I wanted to be a lot less responsible. Being a parent, you have to be a whole lot responsible. So I wanted to be, as I often say, irresponsible. I wanted to live a lighter lifestyle. I often said I wanted to just fish for my food. I don't really know how to fish, so nobody knows how that would have turned out. But anyway, that was my thought. I saw myself living in an RV and just kind of traveling the country. Wherever I ended up, that was where I would stay for a while. And I knew I was going to put in the work for my daughter to be successful. And so my kind of deal with her, and it was a deal that we made as she was headed into kindergarten, is that once she had made it successfully, that she would buy her mom an RV. I will encourage all of you parents, make deals with your kids like around kindergarten, first grade. It's real easy. Sign them up on a contract, whip it out later on when they're teenagers, and you know there's like in kindergarten they kind of like you. So they'll agree to most anything. So she agreed to it. When you're grown and you've made it successfully, you'll buy your mom an RV. And so it's something that we talked about throughout school. Something that I would use as she was taking a test or she was headed to, when she was doing the SATs later on, if it was some grades, I'd say, hey, you got to do good on this because you got to buy your mom an RV. And all of my friends knew it. It was just something that we talked about as she was going through school. And I guess I would say it worked for the most part because she was very successful in school. She graduated. She went to school in Durham, North Carolina, North Carolina Central. She headed into college with a full academic scholarship. She graduated summa cum laude, and she went to Harvard Law. So she's done it. But then, thank you. She hasn't bought me the RV yet, but we're still working on that. But when she left to go to college, we lived in Atlanta. When she headed to Durham, I kind of experienced some mommy anxiety. It had just been us, and her being in Durham and me being in Atlanta, I was kind of she was fine. I dropped her off. I called her back. She didn't answer for several hours. I cried all the way home. So I decided that I was going to move closer to her, not, real close, but I moved to Charlotte. I didn't want to really be a stalker. But I moved to Charlotte, and that was when I began my downsizing process. So in Atlanta, we lived in a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home. I didn't need that size space anymore. And I also, again, knew that my dream was to live a lighter lifestyle. So I put my house on the market, and I moved to Charlotte. And I began renting, and I rented a 3-bedroom, 3-bath condo at the time. I knew that I didn't want to have to go through the process of selling anything again. I have nothing against conventional home ownership. I just knew that I didn't want to be tied down to the requirements of getting a house ready for sale, selling a house. I wanted the flexibility to make some decisions a lot faster, so I started renting. And over the course of 10 years, I moved to the 3-bedroom, 3-bath condo. I stayed there for a little while. My daughter would still come home during school break, so I still wanted some room for her to come home to. And then I downsized eventually to a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And then as she was headed off to law school, I started looking into the 1-bedroom, 1-bath, and she didn't like that very much. She was like, "Where's my bedroom? I feel like if you're going to Harvard, you don't need to come back home and stay in my house." So and there's always hotels. So I downsized over the course of 10 years, and knew again I had started researching RVs. And realized my taste is a little bit expensive. The RVs that I liked were kind of pricey. And I knew it wasn't going to bode well with the lighter lifestyle. I was really going to have to work really hard to pay for the RVs that I liked. So I still had my dream in mind, but I needed to figure out how I was going to get to it so that it matched everything, all of my requirements. You guys have to excuse me, the braces are in the way. So in the 10 years, I just was kind of working the plan, figuring out my plan. And in around 2013 or so, I stumbled on tiny houses one night Googling. Many of you may be familiar with Macy Miller's tiny house. One night just Googling, saw her story about a divorce, losing stuff. She built a house, and she built her house herself. And that resonated with me, and I decided I was building a tiny house. And so here we are, almost May of 2017, and I've been in my house for 2 years now. A lot of people will ask me, well, how did you do it? You talked about having a dream, and I've got some dreams. I've had a dream, this dream for 10, 20 years, but I just can't get to the realization of this dream. And so I'll ask, well, what are you doing to make this dream happen? Well, I go to a meetup, we talk about it. I've got a Pinterest page. Each year I do my vision board. And so then I'm like, well, where's your action? You have to have a plan. You have to have some action to get to your dream. And it's got to be more than just kind of the cartoons when the thought bubble pops up over your head and you're sitting there, or you're sitting there and you just kind of doze off into the world of your dream, imagining yourself in the actualization of this dream. You've got to have an action and some plan with it. And so a lot of people, I've realized, don't know how to get from the dream to the action and to the plan. And so what I want to talk to you about today is putting that plan together, getting to the realization of your dream. And so let's talk about dreams and what they represent. And I want to break down the word dreams. And so we're going to go through all of the letters in the word dreams and help you understand how to get from concept to actual dream. So if we start with the D in dreams, the first word that comes to my mind for the plan and for the action is due diligence. If you're going to get to your dream, you've got to be willing to put in the work to plan how you're going to achieve your dream, unless, of course, you're just kind of rich and you can write a check to make all your dreams happen. That's the easy way out. But unless you are that person, you're going to have to put in some work. And that's the due diligence of it. So for me, with my tiny house, the due diligence was researching. I spent 1.5 years, almost 2 years of researching tiny houses. I didn't do the physical building of my house. I did some of it, but I didn't do the majority of the physical building of my house, but I wanted to be the subject matter expert in my tiny house. So I put in 1.5 years of almost 2 years of research. putting in due diligence might look like taking a part-time job so that you can earn some extra money to put aside for your dream. It might look like cutting back. As I was moving into understanding that I wanted to get to that lighter lifestyle, I knew I needed to cut my expenses. So I went from 4 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms to 1 bedroom, and I made some cutbacks, and I actually had a bank account that I had labeled Tiny House Fund. And so as I was saving money, I could look in my accounts and see my tiny house fund and how it was growing. So if it's physical work, whatever it is about achieving your dream, it's work and it's dreaming. And you need to put in your due diligence. Another D word that is represented by the D in dreams is dedication. You've got to be willing to commit to your dream if it's important to you. If you're not willing to focus on your dream, commit to your dream, or be dedicated to your dream, then you really can't expect that you're going to achieve it. My dream in the beginning, at 10 years, if I had lost focus, of course, over the course of 10 years, it's absolutely easy to lose your focus. I was dedicated to this dream, and while I was living in between all of those 10 years, it wasn't just me getting from point A to B. There were some things that happened along the way, but at the highlight or the forefront of my mind was this dream of lighter living, this lifestyle that I wanted. So I was dedicated to that dream. Another D word that's represented by the D in dreams is disappointment. With some dreams, there's going to come some disappointment. It could be that you don't achieve your dream, or it doesn't end up kind of the way you imagined that it would. And so you've got to be prepared for that. And if you're prepared for disappointment up front, it's a little bit easier to deal with. On the flip side of that, of your disappointment, I'll give you an example about my tiny house build. As I was doing the research, I had my sister that helped me with the plans. Another friend of mine, Jamie, helped me with the plans. And we had gone from me sketching it out on graph paper to my sister putting it together on plans, and Jamie was the SketchUp queen. So from the beginning of my tiny house dream, I knew what my house was supposed to look like, even before I contracted with my builder. The disappointment, I knew that there was a potential of what I knew my house to look like, or should look like, and even though I had plans, working with the builder to get to what I knew my house was supposed to look like, there was some potential for disappointment. I didn't hire a tiny house builder. I was working with a regular contractor. He didn't have the benefit of my research. Again, I was the subject matter expert on my build. So I had to put in some time and some, what I'll say is my due diligence. I put in my dedication so that I was on site for the majority of my build. And as issues arose, I was there to, mitigate it, make some decisions, make some changes, but eliminate any potential disappointment. And again, my D words, I was eliminating my disappointment, I put in some due diligence, and I was dedicated to my tiny house build. If we move to the R in dreams, the first R word that I have that's represented in your dream is resilience. There's so many ways, there's not too many ways that I can tell you that it's not going to be easy to follow your dream. It might not be exactly as you've imagined it, but you're going to have some resilience. You have to be willing to stay the course. You have to be in it to win it. These are all kind of cliche things, but they absolutely apply to following your dreams. So you're going to have to plant your feet into this dream and hold on. So you're going to have some resilience. Another R word that's represented in dreams is your resources. And your resources can stand for people, places, and things. Here, right now, I'll talk about your people. Make sure that you surround yourself with a circle of friends and family that are going to have your back. If they don't, and this kind of sounds harsh, but it's the reality, if they don't have them in your circle. And that's family included. Life is short, and I believe it's important to surround yourself with great people. You need to lean into your resources to help you achieve your dreams, and we'll talk about this more later. But a lot of times you'll have a dream, and if you don't have the support of the right people in your circle, the support of people in your circle, they'll talk you out of your dream. They might not understand it. It's maybe not their dream. And before you know it, they've talked you out of everything that you've been thinking about and have you walking away thinking you're crazy. And that happens a lot in the tiny house world. People will look at you like, what? What are you talking about? When I started talking tiny house living and what I was planning to do, I had a lot of people ask me, are you having financial trouble? Do you need a room? No, I had a plan. And it wasn't until I built my house and then people were able to say, let's talk about this house. Then their light bulb went off. But if I hadn't surrounded myself with some people who, without even getting my dream, who knew this is her dream, we're here to support her, whatever that looks like, it's not my dream, but I'm here to support her, I could have allowed them to talk me out of my dream. Another R word in dreams that is represented by the R in dreams that's important is reciprocate. Be that same resource that I was just talking about to your circle of friends and family so that they can lean into you to follow their dreams. There's nothing worse than a one-sided relationship. And if you have one, you know how that feels. Don't be that person. Give back to the people that are supporting you in your dreams. Reciprocate. Realistic is another R word that's represented by the R in dreams. You've got to determine what's realistic for you in your dreams. If I relate this to tiny houses, one of the things that I see happening a lot on social media and in the Facebook groups that I'm in, people will talk about other people's houses. Oh my God, I wouldn't have spent that much money on that tiny house. That I could have went and bought a house and so for X amount of dollars and blah, blah, blah. I don't participate in those conversations at all. What somebody else might be building might not be your dream. It might not be realistic for your budget. So and you need to be realistic about what works for you. So one of the things that I knew when I built my tiny house, I kind of was on the edge of coming into the movement where everybody was focused more on the minimalistic lifestyle. And as much as tiny house people want others to be accepting of us, we can be a kind of cliquish community. And we'll talk junk about each other in a minute. So coming in on the minimalistic edge of the tiny house world, and you didn't spend too much on your house and that kind of stuff, I caught a little bit of flack because I spent money on my house. It was my house. The money I spent was realistic for my budget. I didn't ask anybody in the tiny house world for money to pay for my house. So be realistic. What's realistic for you might not be somebody else's reality and vice versa. Everybody gets to dream the dream that works for us or for you individually. Another R word in the R of dreams is reset. And this is the one that people often struggle with. I absolutely adore my tiny house. Again, May will be 2 years that I've lived in my tiny house. It was a dream come true for me. But if I were to wake up tomorrow and decide I wanted to go live somewhere else and do something else and I was done with tiny house living, I'm okay with that. Because I feel like you're entitled to dream a dream, go down a new path, do a new dream, and reset. Again, it's about you. It's about what works for you. If you've gotten to this dream, it's not what the realization of your dream, and it's not what you expected, or you want to do something different, it's okay to reset and move on. Let's move to the E in dreams. The first word that is represented for getting to the action and the plan of your dreams is the word effort. And this word is very similar to due diligence. You can't expect to achieve your dream if you aren't willing to put in the effort. And that's really nothing else I can say about that. That one is very simple. You've got to put in the effort to achieve your dream. Expectations is another E word represented by dreams. And this one kind of goes back to being realistic. I see in some of the tiny house groups and some of the conversations where people will post and say, you know what, my family thinks I'm crazy that I'm getting ready to move into a tiny house. You know, how do I deal with that? And I'm not talking about husbands who are interested in the tiny house movement and your wife's not on board, or vice versa. I'm talking about some adults who their family think they're crazy. I don't manage to other people's expectations. If it's your money, if it's your life, you get to live to your dreams and to your expectations. I don't feed into other people's expectations. And again, that to me is important for being able to follow your dream. And if you're following this path that I'm outlining for you, if you've got the right resources around you, remember I said have people that are, thank you, have people that are supporting you and that have your back, then you don't have to worry about managing to other people's expectations, because your resources, your circle that's right there, that's got your back, they're supporting you, and you don't have to worry about those outside expectations. The last E word that I'll focus on is envisioning. Envision your dream. Again, this is a big one for me. If I talk about when I was buying my first house, my 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, before we had completed the sale, I figured out that this was the house I wanted, and we were in the process. I would ride by it was in the back of a cul-de-sac. I would ride by that house every day. We'd get out, my daughter would be like, are we going to this house again? Yeah, we're going to this house again. And I would get out and walk around the house and look in the windows, and I could envision myself in that house. I ended up owning that house. Again, I talked about my SketchUp model of my tiny house. A lot of times, just before we even started building, I knew, in my mind, I knew what it was like living in my tiny house, because I envisioned myself in my tiny house. Envisioning stuff allows you to manifest it, so you need to envision your dreams. Let's move to the A in dreams. And so the first A word that is represented in dreams is achievement. And this is a combination of several words and parts of your dream. You need to envision it, you need to expect it, and you need to be able to expect success. If you're doubting your dream, you're already setting yourself up for failure. So you need to expect achievement, you need to expect success. Another A word in your dream is applause. If you set yourself up with the right resources in your circle, then they're going to be applauding you as you're working to achieve your dreams. But what I'll say to you is, if your resources aren't applauding you, make sure you clap for yourself. Applause is important to encourage you to keep moving through your dream. You need to celebrate yourself. You need to celebrate your achievements. Maybe the dream doesn't go as you've imagined it. It doesn't work out as planned. You still need to remember to applaud your effort. You put in some effort. It didn't go exactly as you planned, but clap for yourself. You did put in that effort. The last A word that I'll focus on as part of achieving your dreams is ask. This one is sometimes tough for me. I'm usually the person that people ask for help. And so I'm not accustomed to asking for help. But then there's that saying that a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So if you're not asking for what you need, asking for help, then you might be missing out on some assistance that you don't know is available to you. During my tiny house build, and I'll talk about this in just a little bit, things got tough. And outside of the things that I could control, I had to rely on other people. And so asking is important, even if it doesn't feel comfortable. But if we go back to the R word of reciprocating, if you're there for your friends when they need to ask for help, then they don't mind helping you. And so while you might feel a little bit uncomfortable about it, you've already been that person for them, so it's okay to ask. If we move to the M in dreams, the first word that I'll focus on is measurable. Now this is your plan. This is part of your due diligence. You just can't decide one day that you're going to go after a big dream if you haven't put some thought into how you're going to get from point A to point Z. And you'll have to have some checkpoints along the way of your A to Z points to make sure that you're on point for that success. So if I relate this to my dream of tiny house living, I sold my house in 2006. And I've told you how I moved from 4 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms to 2 baths. Somewhere along the line, again, life was happening. I think I heard Laura say that she doesn't like winter. One year, kind of around October, I decided, and I live in Charlotte and the winters aren't that bad. I'm just kind of a punk. I don't do cold weather at all. I decided I was done with winter and I packed up and I moved to Florida. I still was on my plan. I didn't buy anything. I rented. I still was in a small apartment. I was still within my financial plan. So that was kind of a zag outside of the straight path from A to Z. But I still knew my goal was the lighter lifestyle. And so my decisions, even though I was doing something that was kind of off the course, I was still focused on my bigger dream and of achieving my dream of tiny house living, my freer lifestyle. The next M word in dreams that I'll focus on is kind of really not a word, but you'll appreciate it. Man up. Following your dream, whatever it is, if it's building a tiny house, whatever your dream might be, it's going to be tough. We talked about resilience. If you're building a tiny house, I've equated building my tiny house to, and it took me, the actual build took 3 months. We started kind of end of February, early March, and we were finished by the end of May. I've equated those 3 months to being a single parent condensed in all of 3 months. I had 18 years to be a single parent. So just imagine what those 3 months felt like. And so some of you are looking at me and saying, we didn't see that on HGTV. You're absolutely right. I did not want to be that woman that you say, oh, there's that sad, angry, crazy lady. But behind the scenes, stuff was happening. And I had to man up and stand in it. And some of the stuff that I wasn't going to allow the cameras to catch, oh, it was ugly. But at the end of it, again, I was putting in my due diligence and my dedication and all of that because I knew what my end goal was and I wasn't going to let anybody mess that up for me. So I had to man up and stand in it and make it happen. Another M word is marinate in it. Again, maybe not the M word you were expecting. But this is similar to your applause. Don't be so focused on achieving your dream that you don't allow your accomplishments or the process to set in and for you to soak it in. Marinate it in it. Take your time through your process and enjoy it. This is kind of one of my, all right, we're done. This is kind of one of my do-over moments, if I had any do-over moments from my tiny house build. There was a lot going on. Building, being on HGTV, making my house, ended up, if anybody has watched the episode and you know how much my house cost, for real, my budget was kind of out of the window of because I was doing my research and kind of, there weren't a lot of houses at the time to compare my cost to. So what I was hoping my house was going to cost, because remember I said about the RV, I've got some fancy, expensive taste. My house kind of went way to the right. So there was a lot going on. And I didn't necessarily take the time that I wish on this side of it to marinate in the process of building and what I was going through and the good parts of my build. So make sure you marinate in the following of your dream. The next M word is your motivation or your magic. And this is relating to your belief system. Whatever your belief system is, you're going to need it during the process of following your dream. So dig into your belief system to help you achieve your dreams and for it to sustain you. When things get a little tough, and as I've shared, things are going to get tough. Following dreams is not for the weak at heart. Make sure you lean into your motivation and into your magic. The last M word is mistakes. This is a big one. Nobody really wants to make mistakes. but you're gonna make mistakes. If you know it up front, if you accept it up front, again, this is one of those things that makes it a little bit easier to deal with. If you embrace it, mistakes are gonna happen, but you don't let that defeat you. You don't let it make you give up. You man up. You see what I'm doing here? I'm using all of my words. But you keep working towards your dream. And you reset if you need to. If you make a mistake and you need to come at this dream a different way, that's where resetting comes in. You already know this isn't gonna be perfect, but I'm gonna allow myself the opportunity to reset if I need to. I'm gonna own this mistake and learn whatever I need to learn from this mistake and move on to the achieving of my dream. The S in dreams, this is our last letter here. The first S is your support system. Now remember I talked about your resources, so we've covered your people. So this is the part of your support system that's a little bit different from the people in your circle that are gonna have your back and follow you and follow you with whatever you're trying to achieve. Those are the people that, you know, as long as it's not illegal, and well, maybe some of your friends will go with you if it's illegal. That might not be the best example. Your resources that I was talking about, they don't necessarily have to understand your dream. They just got your back because they love you. But your support system that I'm talking about now is going to be people. So if we're talking about tiny house living, they're Facebook groups, they're meetup groups, they're other people that you can connect with here at the festival, the people here that are the builders, the tiny house livers. These are the people that understand if your dream is tiny house living, these are the people that understand what you're talking about. So when you're talking about, you know, I need to understand about composting poop, and your friends are like, ooh, I don't want to have anything to do with that. You go say that to a tiny house person, and they're like, oh yeah, well you need to do this, you need to read this book. This is your support system. These are the people that share your dream. And again, if it's not tiny house related, whatever your dream is, there's somebody out there that probably has the same type dream you have. Find those people as your support system so that you can lean into them as a resource. If they're already in the process of doing whatever it is that you're doing, they can provide you some guidance. They can give you some ideas. So you want to have your resources as well as a support system in place for you. And the last S in your dreams that I'll focus on is success. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. Know that your dream is going to happen. Stand in it. Trust your process and own it. Again, if you're not focused on success from the beginning, you're not going to get to success at the end. So as I close, I always like to share a quote by Harriet Tubman. It's one of my favorite quotes. Harriet had a vision and a strength that was just amazing at a time when it was unbelievable that she had that vision and strength. Here's the quote. Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world. So as I close, what I would like to say to you and remind you is to get to your dream, you have to put in the plan to follow your dream, and I wish you designing a life that you love. Thank you. Am I done? Do I have time for questions?
That's what I was just going to say. You want me to help moderate
Sure.
the questions?
Anybody have any questions? Thank you all very much. Yes, ma'am.
Have you found a place to put your house permanently, or where you want to be?
So Charlotte isn't necessarily tiny house friendly. Sorry, what'd you say?
I said neither in Chicago.
So Charlotte isn't necessarily tiny house friendly. When I was initially right after my build, I was in an RV park and ended up having to leave the RV park because there's some other issues that we need to figure out in the world, such as racism. So I left the RV park and was able to find a gentleman whose backyard I've been in for the last year and a half. It's kind of out in the suburbs of Charlotte. I did try to go to the city. Before I went to this backyard, I found a lot that was zoned for mobile homes. It was a private lot, and I went to the city to try to talk to them about allowing me to park there. Initially, they were kind of excited about it. They said, we know tiny houses are coming. We'd like to work with you to see if we can't make this something that we accept. What they wanted me to do was provide my plan. So I've got my plans, and they wanted me to have a structural tie-down plan, which of course makes sense. I want to, my house is big. One of the questions that people are asking is, if you're in a storm, is your tiny house moving? My tiny house doesn't move. It's solid as a rock. But it does make sense to have a structural tie-down plan. That's just common sense. So I took that to them, and the initial review, the guy in the group that I met with, they were receptive to it. And then I think it went up the ladder, and somebody up top said no, and it came back down the ladder, and they told me no. And the reason that they told me no was it wasn't on a foundation, which really made no sense because going in, they knew it wasn't on a foundation. So I'm not sure what happened there. So I am in someone's backyard. I am connected to all of his utilities, an acre and a quarter, a beautiful lot. And I've been there for a year and a half. He's the best property owner I could ever ask for. My draw for me is I'm a city girl, and so I'm kind of up in the suburbs, and as crazy as this sounds, I am so sick of looking at trees, I don't know what to do. It's a beautiful spot, don't get me wrong, but I want to be in the city. And so I have just connected with someone that's closer into Charlotte, that's got a big enough backyard that can support me in my house. So I am moving to that spot sometime soon. The thing about the city, I think they're just kind of they're in denial about dealing with it. They don't mess with me. They know I'm out there. As people reach out to the Charlotte city, they'll point them to me. You need to contact Jewel. She knows how to live in a tiny house. And I'm like, wait, how am I doing your job? So I just think they're in denial, but I was one of the people. You'll hear a lot of people that'll say, well, don't build your tiny house until you have a spot to build it. To park it. I kind of went the other route because I'm very focused on manifesting things and knowing that things will happen. I knew I was going to find a spot for my tiny house, and I've absolutely found several spots. So I went about that a different way, and it has worked out perfectly. I've not ever had, other than dealing with some of the racism in the RV park, I've not had any problems. But that's a whole nother story.
I say that the tiny house community is divided in two different groups of people. There are people that pray to build, and then there are people that build and pray. And I think we're both in the build and pray section. We have time for a couple more questions, and then I'm going to make the decision. We're going to move the audience, but we've got a couple more minutes for some questions for Jewel. Jewel, are you up for that?
I'm absolutely up for that.
Okay, so who's got some questions? We're going to give you a mic, though. Are you going to be okay with that? We're too spread out. Any questions for Jewel? Okay.
Are you still working in the corporate world?
The question is, are you still working in the corporate world?
So I do work in the corporate world. I actually work in Charlotte. It's the big banking industry, and I work for one of the banks. My plan for tiny house living was to be able to make my decisions on employment based on what I wanted to do versus I've been laid off before when I had my 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. Being laid off and needing to find a job, knowing I needed to find a job to pay these bills. That's a different type of stress level when I know I can go hustle and pay my lot rent in my tiny house. And so I do still work in corporate America, and life is funny. Up until a certain point, I've worked in corporate America and a lot of times hated that job that I worked in. The job I have now, I absolutely love it. And my bonus is that I work from home. I've worked from home since about 2007. So working from home looks like, I've been in Turks and Caicos working. And so it's a different feel. I've been a contract employee in the financial industry for many years. I just recently got hired, and in between that time, there was a layoff. I wasn't working. What I just said about the stress level of being laid off in my tiny house is my expense feels a lot less stressful, where I know I can focus on finding a job that I enjoy versus, again, needing to make this money to pay these bills and take this job that I might not like. So, yes, I still am in corporate America, but I feel like it's more on my terms. And that was important to me.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. This is going to be good, I'm sure.
So as I mentioned earlier, I've had the opportunity to interview her before, and one of the subjects that she's touched on only briefly, I'm going to give her an opportunity, however, to go into a little bit more depth. One of the things that she's passionate about, and one of the things that I'm committed to specifically, is diversity in the tiny house movement. And we're not just talking about diversity of housing. You can see here, diversity of housing is very well represented. We've got some schoolies, we've got DIY builders, we have professional builders. What we're talking about now is making sure that the tiny house movement is actually available for all ethnicities, for all economic groups. So can you please take a couple of minutes, tell me, 5 minutes? Can you give me a few words on what suggestions and what advice you have for those of us in the tiny house community and how we can better advocate for diversity?
So, there's not a lot of representation of people of color in the tiny house movement. When I first hit the movement, I would get the messages of, oh my God, I'm so happy to see a brown face. I had an older lady send me a note to say, you are the Harriet Tubman of tiny houses. It made me feel great because I know I've not done anything as amazing as Harriet Tubman, but I knew what she was saying. One of the things that, and we had this conversation with some of the city officials here, until tiny houses are accepted in the urban areas, in the communities, racism exists in the world, and it sucks, but it does exist. So a lot of the places that tiny houses are kind of accepted right now are the rural areas, RV parks and mobile home parks. And because racism exists, and I've shared that I've had some issues, I get a lot of hate mail on my pictures just because there's some brown faces on my pictures. Those are some of the least safe places for people of color. And so it's a barrier for people of color in the movement. Parking is already an issue for tiny houses. And if parking is already an issue for everybody in the community, if I'm going to be in an RV park or a mobile home park or in a rural area and deal with some racism, then I've got an added issue. So my thing is awareness. So until I shared my experiences as a person of color in the tiny house community with Michelle and some of the others, they weren't aware of it because it's not their experience. So what I do is make it something that I talk about. Make other people aware of the experiences. If you're not necessarily a tiny house person, but you have some property and you're not a person of color, but you support the movement and you are building a community, be committed to understanding the need for diversity and commitment to understanding what the issues are for people of color is key. And I think until we're talking about it and understanding how to deal with it and what the issues are, and if you see something happening, I've been kicked out of a Facebook group because I expected them not to use the N-word when they were referring to people of color. If you're seeing that stuff happening and you jump in and you deal with it and you're supportive as an ally and helping so that all of us can walk this walk, and it's just not a community for white young hipsters because I'm none of the above. I think that's how we make this work.
Thank you very much. I can truly say that she has been the voice of reason and the voice of diversity. And as she said, we've had several discussions on the subject, and her walk is not my walk, and my walk is not hers. But we formed a relationship, and we sort of appreciate each other's perspective. And even sometimes we can have a friendly debate on the subject. Thank you very much for your time. Please join me in thanking Jewel Pearson.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So next up on the stage is we're going to do a real estate panel. I'm going to moderate a question and answer. So if you're thinking about a tiny house, or you have property and you'd like to have a tiny house on your property, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about real estate. We're going to talk about the implications of zoning and tiny houses. But before we do that, I'm going to make the master decision. He's not supposed to be here. Is this one of those times you told me I have to go with the flow?
But I am your master.
Just email me, I'll send you out.
Put your right leg in and pick your chair up and move to the shade.
Okay, so what we're going to do is the mother
Okay. What's your time frame?
is traveling over the edge of this tree, and y'all getting home. So we're going to move the audience.